Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Driving Quote to Cash webinar put on by MetraTech and Concur. I'm Kurt Rathie, and I'm going to be your host today. I'm here to introduce two of our guest speakers. And before I do, I want to make a note that we will be going for another 35 to 40 minutes. And during that time, you'll probably come up with some questions regarding quote to cash. Please remember those and note them in the question area on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. We can present those and we can respond to those later on. Now let me begin by introducing Peter Salazar, the Senior Manager of IT for Concur. Concur is, I believe, the world's largest SaaS organization with a market cap currently of roughly $3.6 billion. We're pleased to have Peter Salazar with us, and we also have Jeff Waller. Jeff brings over 22 years of experience and over 30 system implementations in the quote-to-cash arena. And Jeff is Senior Sales Director at MetraTech. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. And with that, I will turn it over to Jeff Waller to continue the discussion.
Thanks, Kurt. I'm pleased to be here today and to be joined by Peter. Certainly appreciate him taking the time to share with us some of the great work that's been underway at Concur. And Peter, it's nice to be able to chat with you again today.
You bet, Jeff, and thanks, Kurt. It's my pleasure to join you and our audience in discussing a topic that I'm sure is definitely front and center with many businesses today in this very competitive and rapidly changing environment.
Yeah, and with that, let's jump into our topic for the day, which broadly speaking, as Kurt said, really focuses on the quote-to-cash process and some of the experiences that we've shared working together. And to set the framework, if you will, Peter, you and I earlier talked about sharing the view that the quote-to-cash process really is significantly important, and that is because, it is one of, if not the most important process that we should concern ourselves. It really covers the entire critical path of a business, right? Starting from the very onset of acquiring customers, delivering the products and services that we provide, getting invoices out the door, and then getting paid for that effort. I'm wondering if you could share just a quick perspective on when you think about the quote-to-cash process and as it relates to Concur, what do you think about as being important around the quote-to-cash process?
Well, Jeff, at Concur, we really have a mantra around here about quote-to-cash. We want to make sure that what we are selling is what is being quoted, and what is being quoted is being contracted for, and that contract turns into, the same things that are being ordered and provisioned downstream, and that's what we're billing for. And so all of those come together to kind of close the loop. So it's also what we want to collect for at the end of the day. That's, we are a profit business. So Jeff, that mantra keeps us with a holistic focus on quote-to-cash, really within the company to improve and optimize, this very key process that's an enabler of global growth and, being able to move across industries and markets, and then, really helps keep that customer experience, that selling experience, our product offerings, those types of things front and center with us. So, Jeff, it's really a critical end-to-end process for us.
Yep, agreed. And I think, maybe to step back just a moment for some of those on the line that may not be completely familiar with Concur, Peter, can you do just a quick backdrop of, the Concur business and some of the highlights of things that you're capable of doing today?
Yeah, sure. I'm hoping most of the audience knows about us, but we are a leading provider of integrated travel and expense management solutions. We were founded back in 1993, and we're really here to help ensure that corporate travel is booked within policy and guidelines, efficiencies before the trip is taken, and then reconcile all those expenses after the travel is completed. So booking travel, managing itineraries, grabbing electronic receipts, enabling employees to spend within the policy, within the budget of the company, and then helping companies control their costs at the same time. So we have about 15,000 clients around the globe and about 15 million users, and of course we're continuing to rapidly grow our markets and our customer base while pushing that innovation envelope of our product.
Yep. And Peter, it's interesting that you noted that, because I was reading an article just that came out in August about Concur. It referenced a Gartner report around the market share analysis for the worldwide software in 2011, and in that report, Concur was ranked number 1 as the largest SaaS provider within the ERP market based on your revenue sales. And it talked also about Concur's, unbelievable precedented growth of about 25% for the last couple of years. First off, let me congratulate you on, Peter. It's a significant accomplishment. And I was wondering, can you comment on what's been happening inside of Concur with that kind of growth around the products and services that you've had to bring to the market?
Well, that kind of growth definitely puts a lot of emphasis around your operational efficiencies and your systems that support that growth from a business operational sense. So, the different market segments, going global, all of these have very different needs in the terms of product offerings and pricing, the way we're selling into those markets, very important. And, for instance, Concur realized that we needed to be able to do much more in the way of offering some dynamics around pricing, some dynamics around how we bundle things together, our promotions, but all within a controlled and very efficient process. So, that led us to the requirement of a necessity for dynamic bundling capability, that dynamic portion of that front end of the process of quote to cash. So, even though many of our deals have the same common components, the customer may still require something a little different, especially with different markets like nationals, right, Jeff, versus SMB segments. And then going global, right? It brings the need for deal customizations, to address localized requirements, specific legal terms, those types of things.
And certainly, as you said, on a base of 15,000 clients, that's no small feat, right? I mean, 15 million users. With that kind of change, I think most of the folks on the call will realize that there are some significant hurdles and things that you've got to get over. But before we get into that, what were some of the early indicators, if you will, Peter, about some of the things that were driving change? Was it the sheer volume of the orders, the contracting process, or was it billing problems?
Well, it was all of the above, right? I mean, I'm sure a lot of the audience has been through a lot of these same issues here, but when we looked at it overall, when I first arrived here, we had a billing initiative underway, right? And so in the billing initiative, there were issues and challenges that were outside of really what billing does, and that led us to, it was really confounding kind of a very good billing solution. So, we didn't have a strong solution architecture around it because of some of these other issues. So, and originally we had several billing systems running back then, due to company growth through acquisitions and product extensions. So we were manipulating a lot of different data and applying those, applying just like multiple processes to calculate the final bill. And we did a great job of doing that in a manual, semi-automated environment. But we quickly realized that we had these other related challenges, such as workflow around deal making, the contracting process itself, and order entry, and multiple manual touch points, and a lack of a really strong data integrity to support the deal integrity, the contract integrity, and the revenue assurance, on that back end.
Yep, and I think you also talked about, Peter, it was not just in one specific target segment that you were after. You had to support multiple channels across the business, right?
Absolutely, and we just needed, a lot more control and management over this, a flexible pricing model. Our company was still, back then was in very high growth and still is, but we really didn't have enough control over what was being sold, with what terms, and from a control perspective, we had good manual controls in place, but those automated controls that allowed you to, to be a little bit more agile or to pivot in a market place.
Yep. And we talked about the new product launches and some of the problems there, and obviously with kind of a disparate system infrastructure that obviously had to provide some problems. When you talked about the need for process improvements, can you touch upon just a couple of examples of the process changes or issues that were surfacing?
Yeah, we definitely needed, process efficiencies around, the selling and contracting process itself. There was still a lot of manual activity and some disjointedness to our system. So, and we wanted to have a lot more visibility into the deals and how they were trending, especially in using promotions and discounts. And in addition to that, as a high growth company, we needed to more closely monitor our customer acquisition cost. Even though when you're growing, you want to grow those markets very rapidly, but we needed to be able to scale operations efficiently, especially going global. So we knew that we needed to be able to price by market or by customer type, and so the cost to onboard and acquire customers was a focus for us.
Yep, and I think that having identified some of those issues and drivers and the needs, if you will, for the process, perhaps we could turn to kind of some of the hurdles that you were faced. I think you actually commented that just getting Concur to recognize that they needed a quote-to-cash program and not so much a specific system project going on was one of the first things you faced.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jeff. When we started, we were somewhat focused on just I shouldn't say just the billing system, because we had identified these other issues, but that's what we had going on. The billing area was the one that was crying out, and so one of the key things we found is that we really didn't have a single source of truth, and we had multiple departmental goals focused on different issues. So,
Peter, let me jump in right there. So when you say this, because I've heard this said by a few different companies and clients, when you say no single source of truth, we hear customers talking about that all the time. Can you elaborate on what that means?
Yeah, most companies can get to a single source of truth, but do they have to go through file cabinets and email and other types of systems and pull that all together to determine what they've done? And so what it meant to us was really we took that view of standardization, standardizing data across our systems and the work processes that were involved across Q2C. And so, even from a business perspective, we were forcing data into our systems and processes, and that created issues with what deals we put together and how those operationalize themselves in the other related systems, and bill processing and revenue assurance. So it had a lot to do with exceptions and special handling.
Yep.
This single source of truth really related to that.
Yeah, and I think as we talked about, that single source of truth is so important for an organization, even for the front-end sales teams, to know what's going on with orders and to know when customers are paying and to have that full perspective or the view of how the business is transacting. And that kind of touches back on this full reach of the quote-to-cash process being so important. When you tackled some of the specific issues around that issue of single source of truth, what did you do?
Well, we focused a lot on making sure that the Q2C process had the right data available to the process itself as an input, as a processor, and then as an output to the process itself. So the key things, a good example may be, was the product object. The product object itself wasn't operationalized fully in our systems, even though we understood it from a business perspective. And that product object also didn't reside in an area where we could group and relate it to other things that we were doing, especially business rules. So a centralized product catalog for our systems and process to use was we were quickly drifting towards that solution. And so that's really one of the benefits, right, and main reasons we selected MetraNet as the billing engine within the Q2C. And we were able to leverage MetraNet's business extension model capability, and so maintaining that flexibility in our business model, and to also build out a product catalog that would help us link product pricing to service to rating.
And for those maybe, Peter, that aren't that familiar with MetraNet, having that capability for business to actually extend the data model like we're talking about, not just by adding extra fields, right, of information, like a few extra fields on the account, but really to be able to leverage new sources of data, new tables of data that apply to the business. When I think about Concur, it's relevant that we want to have relationships with our customers. So you all need to capture things like, what's the customer's preference? Do they want to sit at an aisle seat or a window seat, right? And one of the things that we provide in our functionality gives businesses like yourselves the ability to extend the data objects. And there were a couple others that you talked about that didn't exist inside of Concur, Peter, besides the product catalog.
Right. Yeah. So we actually looked at a number of other really important business objects that either, didn't exist in form or partially existed and were not well defined across, organizational processes and systems. So, just some examples here. We added, a quote object, an order object, a subscription object, and really a well-defined account structure, the customer account, the billing account, and the service account. So, but Jeff, what was really good was we needed to get the entire company to speak, the same language around this, and it was a big step in getting to, really the single source of truth.
Yep, and it is critical for the organization at large to understand all of that. Having identified some of those hurdles and drivers, let me ask you, and maybe just a quick segue, how did you get the program off and running, so to speak? What did you do to align the goals and get the project going?
Well, a lot of the analytical work that had been done prior to my arrival and taking that analytical work and putting it up and throwing it up on the wall type of thing led us across that quote-to-cash process. So it began to link together the importance of these other players within Q2C other than just billing. And so, facilitating that when we looked at making a selection for our billing vendor, having the right people in the room when we did that, a cross-functional, leadership group from, heavily dominated by business, but supported by IT. As we came together, we backed away from the solution and said, what are we really after here? So, a common source of data, right? Reducing sales admin functions, eliminating all this back-end work we had to do, and definitely wanted to improve our speed to market, with our products, and invoicing was really a big part of what we wanted to do here.
Yeah, and I think as people, look at this specific slide on the board, there's probably many of us that can say we all have problems in one or a couple of these different areas, and that quote-to-cash initiative allows us to come back and bring all of that back together to get kind of a common goal, if you will. So, having defined what goals, Peter, that you wanted to go after and the things that you wanted to focus on, right, what did you do to move forward? And perhaps, we want to talk about unveiling some of the secrets of what we're accomplishing.
Yeah, so, we took a broader-based solution view, an architectural view from a business perspective, because quote-to-cash is really a key business process. So, and then we began to think about what we really wanted from a future platform that supported the quote-to-cash process. With the recognition that the billing initiative was, super critical and necessary was a great thing, but we really needed to also do some evangelization, and the key core project team that we had put together began to do that, and as a result, it gave birth to a new program and a group that focused around the quote-to-cash solution, the architectural solution, an architectural team that focused on it, and very cross-functionally driven by, business.
I think go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, no, Jeff, I'm excited because what we're seeing here is really in layman's terms, an engine being built that's across an organization. So I love this slide, Peter, and maybe you could unpack it a little bit for us as we look at kind of all of those elements that really came together across all the different departments to create something quite powerful.
That's right, and an engine is a good metaphor, I think, because the quote-to-cash engine can drive a company in a lot of different directions, but it can be a very big advantage. And so even within the engine metaphor here, there are engines within this. So if you look at it, one of the core areas we were struggling with was, the configure, pricing, quoting, ordering, area there. So from a CRM perspective, we have Salesforce here, but we needed something around that pricing area, and that's where Big Machines comes into play, creating that foundation for a selling engine. Salesforce, Big Machines, DocuSign, Aptus around that, being able to go from the price to the order, and then down below, of course, we are a MetraTech customer. We do have MetraNet installed here. We needed a billing engine. We needed a platform to launch from that kept us very mobile in the market, very agile, And of course, we continue to maintain our Oracle environment, a very powerful player in the area of AR and payments. But one of the key decisions we made up front was to keep this process agile, because you don't know exactly where you're going. So a middleware component from WSO2 was selected, and it gave us that ability to do two things. One, middleware, of course, it's integration, that's great, but it gave us the ability to do business process automation that we may not have wanted to. For example, order management, we didn't want to make a big investment in that up front. So we've been able to virtualize and physicalize that across the WSO2 middleware platform, which has been a pretty big advantage for us, because in the quote-to-cash program, it's given us that extra little ability to automate certain things. So that's kind of our view from an engine perspective of what we put in place here.
And Peter, some people on the call may actually be looking at this and going, wow, that's looks like a fairly complex environment there. Can you talk just maybe quickly just about how the integration went? I know there were some lessons learned there, but I wonder if you just kind of share how you tied it all together.
Well, there's two levels of integration, and so again, we were business driven. So we were focused on what is the day in the life of the sales rep? What's the day in the life of contract administration? What's the day in the life of the biller, right? Mm-hmm. So one of those things one of the things that led us in a direction of selecting the systems we did is that Salesforce is a platform itself, and so being able to plug things into that platform and keeping people within that set of applications that they're using today, and then being able to take advantage of the data that already exists there. So it reduced the amount of integration work that we had to do. And then selecting a vendor like MetraTech, of course, that had very much a SOA web services orientation to them, gave us a lot of flexibility in interacting with these other platforms like Salesforce, which also has that capability. But gluing those things together with an orchestration type of engine in the middle, WSO2, really it reduced quite a bit of the integration pain that a lot of us have gone through in our previous experiences.
Yeah, and I love the fact, Peter, that you do comment so boldly about that it was not just a systems solution, right? It really was leveraging the processes and the flow of data across it and the organizational processes that needed to tie to this solution. Perhaps we can turn to kind of having looked at some of the underlying infrastructure, if you will. Let's talk about some of the benefits, the magic that's been delivered as a result of the program that's been underway.
Yeah, so, I think what, with Q2C implemented, of course, the program was designed as in groups of phases of functionality to be deployed, because it's really hard to do it in one full swoop. You really need to be ready for that. But to have it implemented, we've seen really a good solid integration from these front-end processes, that selling process, into the billing process. All of that has come to fruition pretty well, and we have these processes much more connected today than we've ever had before.
Yep. And Peter, there was something that you mentioned, I think, in our earlier discussions, where you talked about that you've implemented a quote-to-cash onboarding or training program. Can you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, we just, I'm sure a lot of other folks may be doing it, maybe not, but we inserted terminology and visuals into the sales rep training program so that they have an understanding of what the front end is doing and how the back end relates to that. So, it kind of creates a ownership piece, I think, for the new employee to see that, they have a lot to do with our success across quote-to-cash.
Yeah, and I just think that that's a fantastic idea, perhaps, a recommendation to share with others if they're not doing that in their own organizations, because getting that holistic view of how all the pieces tie together, that's got to be very beneficial to the organization.
A question for you, gentlemen. When you look at what's on the screen right now, Peter, the automated pricing, dynamic billing process, and things like that, can you unpack maybe how those systems work together and maybe some of the elements? I think that would be helpful for me.
Yeah, I think, if I take one of the areas like the dynamic billing capability that MetraNet brought us, it helped us provide a support, a rating support, right, a pricing support around our entire product catalog, but it also enabled us to handle, account relationships and those models that were associated with it, things we really needed, like, B2B structures and small to medium-sized business, all of those coming together, and then also supporting a global billing, taxation languaged environment, and being able to downsize from a number of billing systems to fewer that we have today on our way to, trying to get down to that miracle one biller.
Yep, and it is tremendous progress that's been made. It's quite astounding when you think about how much has occurred over a relatively short time frame. Peter, we also touched about some of the process efficiencies now having kind of gotten this in place. Can you speak about just a couple of the specific areas where you're seeing real process improvements across the organization?
Yeah, one of the key areas is, and I think a lot of folks focus on this, is just wanting to move away from order entry and having to do that in multiple times or having to manipulate exceptions after it's flown through the system, those types of things. So we're seeing a lot of gains around orchestration, and as we've been going through the quote-to-cash process, we've been able to lever that orchestration of, both processes and data, so that our workflows become much more efficient. And it's really resulted in better and more complete data capture, which reduces that manual intervention that was, really previously occurring. And more importantly now, with the architecture in place, we are fairly confident that we have a longer-term solution that will grow with our business.
Yeah, and I think that's very relevant. And perhaps that brings us to our next to the last slide, Peter, and I'll ask you to cover this one because it's really important to virtually all of us on the call, and that is, how do our companies, or how do we support our companies making more money, right? How do we drive new revenue and monetize new revenue on the products and services that we've got? You talked about some of the challenges of rolling out new products and services. Can you comment a little bit about where's Concur headed, and what are some of the things that you've seen that you've been able to do in rolling out those products and services and increasing the revenue stream?
Well, one of our focuses on the other slides was, again, getting back to this ability to have some dynamics to your business, especially around what you're selling and what you're billing for, and both the MetraNet applications along with the big machines and Salesforce combinations and the WS2 middle layer has given us a lot of agility in not having to form fit your business model into your system capability, but instead reversing that so that your infrastructure, the combination of business process and your systems come together to give you agility in where your business model is going to go. And so, just an example of that is, we have a lot of core technology around travel management. We've recently introduced within the last year the TripIt, which is a new product that gives you the ability to bring together a lot of itineraries and things that you may not have brought into your travel management system. But again, being able to integrate that product into our product offerings and get selling and billing for that very quickly has been something that we've recognized.
Yep. And Peter, can you talk about that just for a moment? Because a lot of people are talking about wanting to roll out those new products. Did you have to, to get new code released and provided to you to be able to roll out some of those different business models?
Not really. There's another small mantra that runs around here that we try to stay with, and that is, don't code, try to configure. If you do have to code, try to limit that to really those important aspects. Not that we're, completely a configuration shop, but the systems that we selected, the solution architecture that we selected, the intention was for us to be able to configure. So code drops don't don't become part of your critical path in getting new products and services launched.
And I think that's just fantastic news for those on the call. Perhaps we'll turn to kind of the key points slide, and I'll ask you to call out a couple of these.
This is my favorite slide. Maybe it's because I like Chinese food or something like that. But Peter, if you could help unpack some of these end-to-end processes that you were talking about.
Yeah. So these, that first block there of a takeaway here of recognizing an end-to-end process, I think that was really important in us becoming successful here, and that its components in the organizations, like its systems, process, people, etc., all come together to support that quote-to-cash process. So, getting the right players involved, up front and in the process, and supportive of it, and then, really stepping back and evaluating it from an end-to-end solution perspective with a focus on data, right, business rules, workflow, that type of thing, and then taking even a further step back where you become an architect. The team becomes the architect. They're not out there solving these individual problems with great detail first, right? Instead, you have an architectural view of what the landscape is. One of the things we use very much here is a context diagram, trying to get that visual in front of people as to what are we dealing with here. Can we put it on a piece of paper? Can you put it on a board? So that leads you to context, right? Understand the context of your business and how it interacts with the quote-to-cash process. What do you need to do, really well to be successful here?
Yep. And Peter, one of the things that's kind of some dialogue that's been going on out in the industry, and we'll go back to that point that you all are one of the largest SaaS players in the market. And I think what I hear from you, and I think what we've been able to accomplish working together, is maintaining that flexibility, right? Not necessarily knowing what products and services are coming down the road, but recognizing the fact that not everything's going to be billed the way it is today, and it doesn't always fit into a simple subscription model. How has that played into some of the benefits?
Well, it's definitely allowed us to do, to keep kind of a blank sheet on what the next product is, right, for us. It's not boxing us in as this little Chinese takeout box is doing. It's instead it's really a blank piece of paper in front of you. So that leads to flexibility in your the way you're going to monetize, your monetization strategy. The view, the overall view of the customer. All of those things are really enhanced. Right.
And perhaps just one kind of last quick question from me before we take some questions from the audience. Having gone through this process now for the last couple of years and some of the lessons that have been learned, if you had to go back and do it all again, where would you maybe pay a little more attention, or what were some of the things that you might offer some words of wisdom and advice?
Well, I come, one of the things I think very much is just to, I know everybody's very busy and they've got a lot of core functional things that they need to get done in the business, in IT, those types of things. But taking that step back from an architectural view and understanding where you are today and where you want to go, and again, how important this is to it. And from an IT perspective, for IT folks in the audience, I think the other thing is understanding where the business is going and creating that business alignment with the technology that you're looking at, whether it be ERP or best of breed, or open or proprietary type of systems, is to step back and take that architectural view. How does the capability that we're creating here, align with where the business wants to go?
Good point.
Well, gentlemen, I'm going to give you the 40-minute warning here. We've come upon that time in the hour. So I think it's important for us to respond to the audience's questions, and we've gotten a number of them here. Mind if I toss a few of those out to you?
Sure.
Okay. Sure. The first one's around user experience. And so my guess is, Peter, put on your UX hat and think of your knitting together all of these different applications. So this is from David, and David says, from the user experience perspective, what was Concur's biggest challenge in implementing Q2C?
Well, you do have, that's a very good point, because you have multiple users across the Q2C process itself. And so one of the challenges that we definitely had, and this led us to some decision making, was that we felt that a lot of the complexity of certain parts, and an example of that is in the configure and pricing components of getting a quote put together, that it would be great if the sales rep could stay in their homed environment, meaning to us it was Salesforce. That's our CRM tool. That's our lead management tool. How can I lever that platform in continuing that user experience so they're not going right in and out of systems, right? So you could lever the commonalities of the data structure and the look and feel there of these systems. And of course it was a very big driver behind finding a billing system that had enough capability on the back end to allow our billing operations team to consolidate around one central part of a user experience for a billing operation.
Very interesting. Okay, it makes sense to keep them in that experience. If that's the screen that they're used to working in, and create that, I guess, contextual understanding to keep them there is a very wise move, and pull the intelligence that exists in either the billing system or the other systems and bring that right to the UI for them. So it makes a lot of sense. Another question we have here is, who at Concur initiated the project? We, of course, believe, Peter, that you are the smartest and most important person at all of Concur, but who was the one that said, yeah, quote to cash has to happen?
Well, I think it came from that group. It came from a group that got together on a day to discuss a billing solution, and that group was different layers of the organization, from the executives to functional managers, project managers, billing people. So it wasn't more or less one individual that did it. It was much more of a teamed effort, and that's what quote to cash is about. It came from that team decision making. That's the direction we want to go in. We want to have a program that crosses this very important process to us and becomes, very much a business-driven initiative.
We think that's a Freudian slip where you almost said billing there, Peter. But
right. I think that goes back to my billing background. Many people know me. Yeah. I've done billing since almost the day I stepped out of the college door there. So,
but it really is a good point, Peter and Kurt. I think that from experience speaking, right, it is those projects or programs that get taken under more than just one department. And we talked about some of those different departmental objectives. But when an organization comes together and decides that, hey, we are touching the quote-to-cash process, and then starts to work together on it, those are the ones we've seen that have really been successful.
Now, another one here, Peter, and I don't know if this is in your bailiwick or might be in one of those subgroups or departments that were a part of that initial group, but Gary is saying, talk about some of the pricing models. How do you determine the best pricing model for different markets and things like that? Does the new quote-to-cash process enable A/B testing, or maybe a little bit of insight into how that happens and how this process helps that?
I can talk about that. One of the things that it does very much, that the folks that actually make those decisions in our organization, they said, hey team, I need a lot more data around this area. I need to understand, I need visibility into what is occurring now from a pricing and quoting perspective, and I need to be able to analyze that data. How are we doing discounting? How do promotions actually work? That's what that type of data feeds a lot of the agility around doing modeling around what type of pricing model am I going to use as I move into a new market or with a new combination of product and services. So from my perspective, that was one of the key pieces in putting together that dynamacy for them.
Okay. So that's driving pricing flexibility. Maybe not an exact answer for how did you come up with the pricing models, because that's probably a whole other group of folks, but you had the tools to create that dynamic responsiveness. So when the crazy people in marketing, and I can say that because I work in that world, can come to you and say, or come to the department and say, I want to try something new from a pricing perspective, you don't have to recode.
That's right, because it's the other part of that, maybe I could give a little bit more color around it, is I talked about the data, but the other thing that's really shifting and people are using a lot more of is there's a lot of spreadsheets out there that have rules in them. And those rules are written in a manner in a spreadsheet, right, to get you to an end result. And so in order to really define, to be able to give you some flexibility around those pricing models, you need a rules-based engine or a rules architecture in which you can apply those. And you can change those rules as you go through. So, that's probably a little bit more of maybe what Gary was looking for in an answer from me. But a lot of what we do now is rules-based.
Very good. I have another question that might play into that a little bit, and this is, think back to that engine slide, that engine image that we had, and through that you were talking about a single source of truth. And the question is, with the engine image in mind, where do you get your single source of truth today? So it sounds like someone looking at that slide might say, hey, there's a lot of things going on. I see pistons, I see crankshafts, I see big machines, I see Aptus, I see financial force. Where's the single source of truth come from? And maybe that's more of a concept than an actual data source. But I open that up to you. And what are your thoughts, Peter? Where do you get it in that engine? Where is the single source of truth?
Well, again, that's a really excellent point. And somebody's being very, they could be very, physical or logical in looking at it, but the single source of truth has to do with the different areas, and it gets back to kind of the principles behind architecture. Who owns? Where does this data reside? Who owns it? Who embellishes it? That type of thing. And can other processes depend on that data being in great shape? So an example of that is, where does the single source of truth reside for your leads, right? And so for us, that's very much in our CRM, which is Salesforce. And where does your single source of truth for rated usage reside? Well, it resides in our biller. And so in our model, in our architectural model, we made decisions around or formulated principles around who owned those different things. And so we're a bit more federated. So to get to that super layer, that logical layer, it is federated, and we have to bring it together. And something that's not reflected as much on this on that slide is also, of course, we have our data warehouse that brings things together and then can apply multiple views of that single source of truth. Okay.
Appreciate that. Shifting gears a little bit on you here. This is a little bit higher level and more business focused. As we look at your explanation, you're certainly a very deep and intelligent kind of architecture and technologist, but when we look at it, it looks real complicated. Is this something that only an enterprise should be doing, or is quote-to-cash something that someone who's got a $2 or $5 million business, should they be doing it, or should they only be doing it when they get to the $3.6 billion capitalization that Concur has?
No, really, and I've had other quote-to-cash experiences outside of Concur with much smaller companies, but if you look at it, quote-to-cash is one of the, can you call them the 5 to 7 core enterprise processes that a business needs to focus on in order to build. And so a smaller company, right, may not have quite the focus on, let's say, dynamic pricing or bundling in the beginning, but what the focus that they should be having is that the quote-to-cash process exists in their company, and how does the performance of quote-to-cash relate to where I want to go? So if you're at 1 billion, you're at 1 million today, and you want to get to 1.5, is the quote-to-cash processor an enabler for you? So the slide does show, there is some complexity there, but, in talking about our partner Salesforce here, that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to develop technology, footprints, application infrastructures like this to help a business scale from that smaller end, part of the business to that upper end.
Very good. There's another question here, and this really deals with kind of a granular process of that quote to cash. When you and I were talking previously, we talked about some islands and data from the sales rep or the contract might not always get in a timely manner to where it needs to be, and there might be some data that's changed or left out. When you look at the process now, is it all automated? Can I sign a contract or can I get a quote from one of your sales reps electronically and then click yes to buy and just have it flow automatically through to payment, or are there still a lot of manual processes?
There are still some manual processes involved because it's a phased approach. It is, we are a bigger company. It needed a phased approach in order to identify those really big bang for the buck type of things that we needed to get in place. And so we didn't focus on that micro detail of all these little things needed to be automated. Instead, we went after those bigger items. And in addition to that, we had an architectural view. So we needed to establish platforms such as the billing system, right, the billing engine, in which we could launch from. And the same thing with Salesforce and big machines. We needed to get that beachhead in place in order to, and then our business is growing, so we wanted to stay agile there and be able to pivot, as we went through markets. So we didn't tightly couple everything down and didn't automate everything yet. And I think the team is pretty happy about making that decision because we can now see things, capabilities that we did not have before. We can now see those and identify what we want to do next.
Peter, when you talk about automation and what you did or didn't do, it sounds like a sales rep can engage me. Have you rationalized an online sales process too? Are there things where someone could come to the Concur website and click buy now without talking to a sales rep and have it enter the same process the way a direct sales model might work?
Yeah, definitely. And again, putting a platform in place to be able to address that, how we wanted, how we wanted to interact with the customer and in the future was definitely a big part of it. You can do that today. There's especially with our, it was labeled our Breeze platform, but our mobile platform, you can do that today by coming to the Concur portal. But in the future, what other portals do you want them to be able to book from? Yours and probably others, right? And so those were capabilities that we looked at a couple of years ago that we wanted to fit in here in the future.
And I think my last two questions here that were posed is how does quote to cash lower CAC? And I'll explain for the audience. CAC, C-A-C, stands for customer acquisition cost, very popular term in the SaaS world. So Peter, how would you think that, or how did you hear or experience that quote to cash was lowering your customer acquisition costs?
Well, there's a couple of pieces, but I'll highlight only two of them here. One is in the area of actually getting that quote in front of a customer, right? You want to do that fairly quickly after you've made the initial contact, and you don't want any manual touch points around that. You want to move that through very quickly, and then once you have a decision to buy, you want that next step to flow through. And so what's critical here is, again, getting back to that. What you priced to the customer and what you sold and then what you contracted for is what you want to tee up for provisioning. And so enabling that to flow through into an automated provisioning function really helps reduce that customer acquisition cost. And then going forward, we're in the enterprise business ourselves, and so we have complex customers with complex structures and payments and that type of thing. We want that set up also without the need for a lot of exception processing for someone to actually look at something and have to go in and manually alter it. So those are two of the key areas that we've seen, a reduction in what it costs to get a customer onboarded.
Well, very interesting. You sort of answered the other question I had that was really around, is it a business process or an IT process that you undertook? And I'm thinking it's really a business process.
Yep, it's definitely, it's definitely a business process. IT was there to create, that structure of looking at the process, and it's a reasonably technical process, especially if you have multiple systems involved and entities within an organization.
Well, Peter and Jeff, I think we've exhausted our time. We've got some folks who were very kind to submit some great questions and really engage us. And I think you folks provoked a lot of thought. And to that extent, if folks want to review what we've shared here, they'll be able to do that. So all of you folks who are online will get an email giving you a link to review and watch this session again within 24 hours. So that will be up and available for you if you want to unpack and rewind and review and replay all of our faux pas and all of our answers. So once again, thank you all for being with us. We're done, and thank you for watching. Take care. Bye-bye now.